James. All right, let's go. We're here, and what we want to do is talk to our clients and all of our subscribers and all the people that are following us to tell them a little bit more about Whiteark, right? So since you came up with the name, can you explain to us how Whiteark was born and what the name represents?
So Whiteark, I think, Joe, really has its earliest origins probably around the time that a private equity firm had come in and taken the business that you and I were working in and basically bought it, divested it from the business we were working in. And what we saw there was how fanatical they were in that process of delivering that carve out. And we said, geez, you know what? There's an opportunity here for us with all the businesses that we know and the enterprise customers that we know, family practices that we know. There's a gap in the market around delivery, and something that you're very passionate about and I'm very passionate about, is delivering, getting stuff done, right?
Yeah.
But in an effective way. So we said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could actually partner and then go and bring on board a whole host of people that we've met and worked with over time that we know also share the same passion for delivery and effective implementation, and put together almost like an A-grade team to help businesses, I guess, bridge the gap of getting stuff done. People call it go to market, they call it transformation, but it's really about getting stuff done and having measurable results that tell you got that stuff done, right? And I actually think we had some great experiences, each of us independently across our career with great organizations delivering and getting stuff. So we basically came together and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could take everything that we've learned and actually help organizations deliver?
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? I think one of the things that we see as our biggest differentiator across a lot of consultancy companies that we've worked in and worked with is actually helping people deliver. And what we know is where transformations or where things fall down, where strategy isn't implemented, is that execution piece. And the statistics are mind-boggling. That I think it's 80% of companies don't implement the plan. So it's not that they don't have a plan and they don't have an idea, but they don't actually implement it. And so a lot of what we're hearing and what we've been hearing and what we felt when we had companies work for us is they'd bring you a plan, but actually you might not have the capability in your organization, the capacity in your organization, or the actual change driver in your organization to actually be able to implement that change. And I think to your point, James, we at Whiteark are different, right? We actually bring that execution capability because that's where it's hard. That's where the rubber hits the road. You can have all the plans in the world, but if you don't actually be able to execute on those plans, then it doesn't mean anything at all, right? It's just a PowerPoint pack in your drawer. And what we didn't want to be is a PowerPoint pack consultancy company.
And I think one of the things, Joe, that we both learned and were really passionate about was we'd work with so many great consulting companies, right?
Yes.
And can I tell you, so good at helping organizations build strategy, so good at helping organization build program schedules. But the one thing that we saw was then when it came to execution, it was kind of on the organization to just get it done, right? And I actually think where we basically saw the magic happen was because we were both leading respective, I think you were CFO at the time and I was executive GM of the business I was running. When we got involved and we removed all the layers and we went and said to some partners that we worked with, hey, you know what, we're going to deliver this together. And here's what success or the key metric, and it might have been, I think of some of the great things you did in cash flow, or some of the great things you did in managing churn, or some of the great things that we did in actually, driving great sales execution or go-to-market strategy. It was because we got involved, but we also got everyone else who was on the team to be equally leaning in and, bringing those layers together in an engagement sense and having a single-minded focus on what good was. Like, if it was churn from this percent to that percent, or cash flow or bad debt, didn't matter, but being really clear around what success was and everyone signing into that success, I found we actually delivered great results. And that's what Whiteark's about, because we're not a consulting firm that delivers just strategy, because we love actually working on strategy with our clients. We're a consulting firm that delivers great results. And if you
Mm,
think about I love our name because I think Whiteark, because white is all about Edward de Bono's white hat, which was all about, have you got the data that you need that underpins and
mm,
validates the strategy? And the ark is all about Noah's Ark. Okay, well, that was actually a transportation device to actually
mm,
get people. And then, what people don't see is that little logo at the front, which is a target. So having those ingredients and having everybody on board, I
mm.
believe, is what sets us apart, Joe. I really feel quite passionately about that. And I know that our clients that we're working with, resonate with this gap in the market. There's a gap in the market with consulting firms like ours who want to partner with clients to
Mm.
actually personally help them develop their goals.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And us getting our hands dirty and with the wealth of experience we've got, which is we've got experience in being executive in a large organization driving transformation. We're not people that have just been consultants. We've got that practical experience, which means that as you execute, nothing is going to go to plan. Not everything is going to go to plan. And so you have to know how to pivot. You have to know how to change and how quickly you have to be able to change to get things back on course. And that's part of the experience we've got, is helping organizations be able to pivot as they're doing their transformation, as they're doing the go-to-market plan. And I think one of the other things that you talked about, Ciuffetelli, and it's a really, really important one, is this concept of data. What we saw in working together, in private equity, was the richness and the importance of using data to drive strategy, but to also drive operational improvement. And the reality in this world at the moment is there is so much data, but most organizations aren't leveraging that data to make good strategic or commercial decisions. So how do we help organizations really understand their data, their customers, their consumers, the market, what all of those data pieces look like, to actually say, actually, the change you need to make is X. And also, this is how you measure that change, right? And
It's
this is what
it's
success looks like.
it's so true. I remember when you first came to me, and I was running a revenue channel. It was probably 7, 8 years ago, and you said, hey, if we sort of leverage data and analytics, and then maybe some diagnostics tools to drive this digital transformation for the business I was running at that point in time, what do you think? And I remember going, no, it's all about just activity. If I manage activity, the results will come.
Yeah.
But the truth was, what I learned from that was really having the right data. Didn't get lost in it, but we didn't get
Yeah.
lost in it. We were really clear around what the comprehensive data strategy set had to be. And you know what, the experience was phenomenal, but what it actually did for revenue, Joe, what it actually did for customer experience, and
Yeah.
what it did
No.
for even the way that we tactically took the go-to-market approach. I've got to tell you, having the right data set really sets you up for success, because then I think you've got a real sense of clarity and alignment for the group, to really drive, the right outcomes.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, what it allows you to do is set a kind of baseline of what you're currently tracking at and what does success look like. And it allows you to actually properly actually measure what success looks like off the back of your program. And I think that the word transformation and transformation director and transformation program probably gets overused.
I agree.
But every organization right now is having to change the way they do things, because actually the world has changed. And managing that change, whatever you want to call it, but figuring out what are the 5 or 6 key priorities that your organization needs to do right now to make sure it's set up for success is kind of critical. And I think one of the things that we learned from experience was, if sometimes you've got too many priorities, so getting down to what are the core priorities that your organization needs to deliver to be successful, and really honing in on those priorities, and having clear accountability rather than trying to do too many things. And I think one of the challenges at the moment from an organizational perspective is people don't know where to start. So what they're trying to do is go, I've got 25 priorities. And I think the real challenge for the CEOs and the executives of these organizations right now is, what are the couple of things that are going to make the biggest difference to their organization, and how are they going to drive this change agenda in an environment where staff are worried about their jobs, people working from home, and how do they build a really good culture of change and momentum. And I think that people piece, and you touched on it before, James, is really important because, you know, actually engaging your teams on this is going to give you a lot better outcome. But wrapping around those teams some capability externally to challenge them, to guide them, to direct them, and to hold them to account really will give you the best possible outcome. If you bring a consultancy company in to drive a change for you, you're not going to get buy-in from the organization. And so it's that, you know, I feel like our model at Whiteark, with the bench that we bring that is very specific to the client problem and the industry, and wrapping that around the client teams to really say, how do we work with you to drive the best outcome, I think gives the best possible outcome for the organization to be successful.
I agree, and I think some of the consistencies, Joe, we've seen in both of our careers to date, and even with the clients that we work with, there's not many clients who don't have a line of sight of what they should be doing. And because most of them, we walk in and they've got lots of ideas or lots of change initiatives. I'm thinking of one client in particular that we've been working with, a massive global organization, but they were trying to cut too much, right? I mean, they had probably 25 future strategies for their organization, and they're all good, right, in their own right. But as you spoke about, sort of prioritization, and then overlaying that with the data around, okay, what is the market telling you? What are your customer personas telling you? And then that actually helps you prioritize in its own right. So I think there's a great opportunity from our perspective to simplify by letting the data give you an insight into what the story could be, and then prioritizing your future strategies accordingly. And we're seeing it work really well. And the simpler we keep it, I know the more that our clients engage in it. And you know what, at the end of the day, they judge us on realizing the outcomes that they've got to deliver to their shareholders.
Yeah. And I think, you and I are a great team in combination, and we have been for a long time, right? Because between us, we've got pretty much experience in everything across the board in all the different things you need to do. And we've got the underlying private equity experience, which is about fast-paced change management transformation of an organization to realize a very quick return, right, from a cash flow and overall P&L optimization perspective. And we've also got the working with large corporations as well as other consultancy companies. But coupled with our overall experience and our executive experience, what we've got is a bench of people that we've worked with, that we know and love and trust, that we work to match for every client who's the right person to put. So not who's available, but who's actually the right skill set, experience, cultural match that will work best with each of our clients. And so we continue to look for new people to put on our bench from a Whiteark perspective, but we spend a fair bit of time making sure that we get the right people with the right capability so that we can bring a really great, strong, robust team to every single one of our client engagements.
Yeah, and I think that's beautifully put. I mean, if you look at the consistency across our client engagement, especially from a private equities perspective, what is private equity? It typically involves an acquisition of some sort, and then a transition from whatever holding to the next holding, and then post transition, what does the business look like to run day-to-day BAU? And one thing that our team does bring is have a variety of experience across those three domains. And, they've got a passion and energy for the businesses that they serve. And that's also driven because we're right there with them.
Yeah, exactly. So we're very hands-on in the engagement. We're not running too many engagements at the same time, and we're really getting hands deep involved with our teams to drive the right outcome. And you will have seen, our listeners and our subscribers and our clients will have seen that we've been, very active on LinkedIn and content. And we've been very focused on listening to our clients, listening to the market and saying, where do people need guidance, right? Where do people need some extra information? And I know for me, actually, how do you navigate post this COVID piece? What's going to happen with consumer trends and customer trends, and how do organizations need to pivot in different industries? And you'll start to see, and there's already a lot of content on whiteark.com.au around go-to-market transformation, how to respond to COVID, how to lead through these difficult times. And we'll continue to bring you richness of content that we prepare ourselves with our team. And how do we practically provide that advice to you? So if you want to chat with us about any of the content that we've posted, we'd love to speak to you. We personally write the content, all of us ourselves. And we're very focused on what we hear people are worried about or interested in, and we tailor our content to that. We've also launched a podcast series called The Chiefs, which is a weekly podcast series that will come out every Wednesday. And it's about James and I talking to all the different chiefs out there about what makes them tick. You know, why and how have they been successful in running their businesses? What can we learn from them? And we've got a great lineup of people coming to you. I'm not going to give you too many clues away, but, you know, tune in to the Chiefs every Wednesday and tune in and look at our content, subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss any good richness of content, because what we bring you is relevant content that's important for businesses to how do they pivot, especially in this difficult time.
You know,
So,
what's been amazing, Joe, you know, I sit back and reflect on lots of the conversations we've had with clients and with peers and what have you through COVID. What we've seen is that the COVID pandemic is really, you know, for everybody who did their crisis management plans and what have you, what COVID threw in was all these unexpected variables that nobody seemed to, some people were prepared for some, but not all of it. Some prepared for none. And, you know, so everybody was in a position where they had to handle it. And some companies successfully developed sort of plans and strategies to work their way through it. And now they're looking further forward, and, you know, they're really getting the business set up for the next future layer, as opposed to just dealing with a crisis. Others are still trying. But, you know, what we were able to actually do was actually sit in and say, okay, how can you actually mobilize your organization's efforts here and now in the wake of COVID, in the wake of this crisis, and do the best you can with the transition to the next step, and then the next step. And, you know, really, it's been really interesting because there's probably been a couple of key areas. We certainly helped a lot of organizations in crisis management in the early days. I think about the workforce, you know, mobilizing the workforce remotely, technology, and, you know, how to make that work. Now we're starting to talk to people around their operations and their supply chain. And you've been talking to a whole host around, okay, how do you set yourself financially up for this new normal? And, you know, what does that look like from a strategy perspective, from a brand perspective, from a go-to-market perspective? And I think it's been really interesting because for most organizations, COVID's actually presented a really positive opportunity to transform by default, but to really get ready for, you know, for a new future for your organization.
Yeah, no, it has been interesting. And I think, you know, I hear more and more, and being part of and involved in organizations around this whole leadership piece, right? And how, and you know, I've talked a bit about this, but how as leaders, how do you navigate this piece? And there's no one size fits all, but how do you engage your employees and take them on the journey? And you've got some organizations that are in a more difficult spot because they don't necessarily know what their future workforce is going to look like, right? And others that are just working out how do they actually manage it back to the office, and how do you get people comfortable with the office and comfortable with public transport, and how do we actually help our economy, especially in Victoria, come back in the wake of the fact that we want to get people back to the office, but in a safe and managed environment, because no one wants their brand on the news because they're the first company in Melbourne to have COVID through their workplace. So it's a difficult time. And you know, one of the things that you read up about and you hear a lot about is mental health. And I think there are a lot of people that have struggled with this period and the anxiety of what it means for their families and their health. And maybe it's given them a chance to reassess priorities about the role they're in, what they're doing. And I think it's made organizations also reassess their priorities. And I think as we're running into Christmas, every company needs to have a plan about what is the new year of 2021 going to bring, because there's good and bad about this year, but actually really planning a really strong start into next year with your people, with your strategy, with your change agenda is going to be really important to be able to make sure that next year comes off with a bit of a bang. And I think the employees and everyone in organizations is going to need that to build that momentum into the new year.
It's so true. And you know what? I actually think that the leadership challenges you refer to it, it's similar but different depending on. I mean, the one that always comes to mind for me, Joe, is a lot of organisations are talking to us about,
Mm,
hey, in that initial COVID moment, we had to get our people safely set up at home and all the rest of it, and it was great, thumbs up. And now our staff are really happy. But now we've
mm,
gotten a poor line of sight of productivity. And I
yeah.
think what we've seen out of some recent stats, I think one of the most recent surveys, we saw a 50+% drop in productivity globally in terms of, yeah, so that's a problem. So now leaders are leaning in and saying, okay, how can we leverage technology, or how can
Mm,
we leverage collaboration tools and what have you to drive productivity gains? I know one of the things you're really passionate about, a lot of organizations, a lot of our clients are saying to us, hey, suddenly now we've got cash flow issues, right?
yeah.
So, we deferred payments because we wanted to help our customers and what have you. But now, what, our cash flow is down 30+%. So how do you actually get that back on track? Because without cash, you don't have
Mm,
a business. And then we saw some larger enterprises who had deferred product development or what have you, because maybe their product development now because of the cash flow. So how do you actually get that back on track? Because without some go-to-market strategy there,
mm,
you're not going to have a business in the future. So supply chain disruptions. Joe, there has been so many things that I
mm,
think COVID has had an impact on leadership on.
yeah.
But again, narrowing it down, what's the biggest area? So if it's productivity, how do we go and address productivity, get
Yeah.
everybody on board? What does the data tell us? And what is good and what does the goal need to look like? And I actually think just simplifying it is where we've had greatest success so far.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just because I'm very passionate about cash flow, so when you give me an option to talk about it, I'm just
Sorry.
jump straight in. But people made tactical decisions to be able to manage their cash flow, which is completely fine. What they've now got to find is a sustainable plan for their cash flow. So how do they change things that are in the overall process of how they manage their cash flow that helps them have a sustainable cash flow model? Things like using credit cards to pay suppliers so they can actually get another 60-day terms. And a lot of the banks offer really large credit cards. And right now, with the cost of capital being so low, it's a really good way to defer your supplier payments over and above your normal supplier terms without putting stress on your suppliers who are also trying to manage their cash flow. Looking at customers that aren't paying you, thinking about, coming up with deals or arrangements with them and making sure that you're getting the cash earlier. But there's a lot of tactical things that you can do that help build a sustainable cash flow model for the business. And you and I could probably talk forever about some of the things that we're hearing and how we can provide advice to the business. But I'd really encourage our listeners and our followers and our clients to look at our website, to look at the content we're putting out, to subscribe to our newsletter and our podcast, The Chiefs, because what we're doing is bringing this content to you on a daily basis, which is written by us based on things that we're hearing to provide you the guidance that you need to optimize your business solution. So this has been, really great from my perspective. And James, I think great just to have a dialogue, right? And to hear about what we're doing at Whiteark and why we're doing what we're doing.
I couldn't agree with you more. And just one last point, I wanted to get a point. You got a point in on cash, so I thought I'd lean in and get a point in on people just to try and match you, right? But some of the things that we saw around people was very much in the early days of COVID. You had organisations who were really worried about their people's well-being and setting
Yeah.
them up at home. But then all of a sudden, we actually saw leaders struggling to be able to communicate with
Yeah.
their teams. And some of the things that we discovered work best with leaders, we're actually now starting to use video or email updates. We embedded video in the email updates to talk consistently at a weekly level with their people, sharing links around health and well-being, which you mentioned earlier, Joe.
Yeah.
What I'm loving now is seeing a lot more corporations put so much more emphasis every day into people's mental well-beings
Yeah.
and health and putting in some places. And now what I'm actually enjoying is seeing the shift where people are now starting to talk to their staff through these tools, through these polls, through these engagement mechanisms around,
Yeah.
okay, Joe, how might I get you back to work? Because now what you're seeing is people nervous about going back to their city offices. Or
Mm.
so you've got organisations that are saying, okay, well, we'll offer you a voluntary work from home opportunity. Or you've got others who are forming, red teams and blue teams, and then they're leaning in on what transport you might want to take to travel because it'll be safe. So I actually think this whole era has created a new era of leadership where we're leaning in even more and more. But it's going to be fascinating times ahead, and I'm really looking forward to working alongside you, our team, and our customers to help businesses transform, change, get to sale, private equity firms find those hotspot businesses, and we'll play the role of the arc the whole way through.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you. Thanks,
Always a pleasure,
everyone.
Joe. Thanks everyone for dialing in.